Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. My name's Amanda N, and today it's going to be a little bit of a shorter video, but I'm just here to talk a little bit about medieval ghost stories. I hope you're all having a fun holiday season. Maybe if it's snowing where you are, it would be good to kind of turn out the lights and listen to this with the volume low. I don't know how creepy you want to get. Anyway, I figured it would be fun to see how ghost stories have evolved and if there's any explanations for each one of them. So the first one we'll touch upon is Asmond. According to legend, Asmond, Prince of Iceland, was on a hunting expedition when a storm came upon him. Prince Aswad saved him, bringing Asmond to the hall of King Bjorn. They became really close and pledged a death pact, saying that if one of them died, the other one would accompany him to his grave. They were also blood brothers, meaning they had mixed their blood together. Years later, exactly that happened, and Aswad was the first one to become ill and die. Asmond followed him to his grave and was sealed inside a tomb with Asmond, his dog, and his horse. However, Aswad himself wasn't exactly dead. The man stirred, woke, ate his dog, horse, and then attempted to eat his blood brother Asmond. But 300 years later, kids broke into the tomb and found Asmond, who claimed he'd been fighting for his life for 300 years. The story translates to roughly this. Aswad had come to life in the nights, and in his continual struggles had wrenched off his left ear. The listless night of the cavern, the darkness of the ancient den, have taken all joy from my eyes and soul. I have fought with the dead, enduring the heavy burden and grievous peril of the wrestle. Aswad rose again and fell on me with his rending nails, by hellish might renewing ghastly warfare after he was ashes. This story has also been used to explain that Draugr are ghost spirits or reanimated deceased that come to life inside a burial mound. Others say that Draugr, I'm sorry if I'm saying that incorrectly, but they're more like vampires or savage nightwalkers that possess superhuman strength. They either have pitch black or pale white skin, and the only way to ensure that one never returns is by decapitating them, burning the body, and then dumping the ashes into the sea. Another commonly known story is the one of Byland Abbey. The ruins in North Yorkshire have 12 stories written about them, and though they're in Latin, they're full of local references. Apparently the ghosts in these stories aren't malicious, but people who died without confessing sins, righting wrongs, or preparing for a good death. These sins in question tend to be pretty mundane. For example, story number 9 tells of a ghost whose crime is a matter of sixpence. In story 6, the ghost of a canon of Newburgh Priory is tormented for stealing silver spoons. In story 7, a hired hand is punished for overindulging his oxen, feeding them on his master's corn and letting them plow the land too shallowly. The ghosts try a variety of tactics for persuading people to help. Story 1 tells of an enterprising ghost in the area of Rivolo who helps carry a sack of beans in return for absolution. In story 3, the rather forlorn ghost of Robert of Kilburn wanders around the village at night, standing at windows and doors, waiting to see if anyone is going to come out and help him. Eventually, the priest hears his confession, and he's able to rest in peace. Long story short, the best way to get rid of these ghosts is by just helping them, doing what they need, helping them move on. It reminds me a little bit of Ebenezer Scrooge, the tormented souls wandering about. This reminds me also of the devil and how he's evolved, the imagery of Satan or the devil throughout the years. Originally, he was seen as somewhat of a trickster, rather than the classic red-horned, evil fork-tail figure that we know today. And through this evolution, he had rather, I'm not going to say small crimes, but was more of a trickster, was more of a prankster than a true force of evil. So even though we tend to look back on medieval ghost stories and medieval times as being so much darker, sometimes ghost stories were a little bit more complicated than that and a little bit less black and white. For example, when the Vikings were raiding England in the 9th century, a saint named Edmund turned himself over to the invaders rather than have his people be overrun, according to Ælfric Ensheim's Lives of Saints. Ælfric was an English abbot who wrote hagiographies, homilies, and biblical commentaries in the 10th and 11th centuries. Edmund tried to convert the Viking invaders, and in response they tortured and beheaded him, throwing his head into the forest. Contemporary Christian burial customs dictated that the head had to be buried with the body for the sake of wholeness, anticipating the resurrection of the dead at the Last Judgment. Wouldn't really want wandering bodies and wandering heads around then, would we? A witness who had seen the beheading had an idea where to look, so a search party traveled there calling out for Edmund, eventually hearing the head itself respond, "Here, here, here." They found Edmonds Head, which was speaking to them, miraculously being guarded by a wolf, which kept the carrion animals at bay. After the head was recovered, Edmund was given a martyr's burial. Years later, his body was exhumed from the local churchyard to be moved to a nicer location. Alfric wrote that his body looked almost entirely healed and that the head had seemingly reattached to the body, with just a thin red line around his neck to show where he had been beheaded. Of course, I don't really believe this story is true. We know that it's not physically possible whatsoever. But it's still interesting that even through something as grim as that, a torturing and beheading, there's almost a lightheartedness to it. A head calling out, "Here, I'm over here." It seems almost silly. Whereas I think a lot of ghost stories now are maybe darker in a way, where some of the ones that I've heard through horror movies are very black and white, are very simple. This woman in white is going to come and steal you and take your children, and that's that. Rather than, oh, if you hear a head shouting in the forest going, "Here, here, here," it probably wants to be reattached to his body. Of course, that's just my opinion. I'm not necessarily saying that this is absolutely how all ghost stories of this time went, but I think it's interesting that medieval ghost stories are not necessarily as dark as we believe them to be. If anything, medieval stories or Middle Ages stories, or really just early 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th, there was plenty of darkness going on with the Black Plague that they maybe didn't need to make their ghost stories quite as horrific and quite as brutal. That was already their real life. Anyway, that's just my opinion. That's just a little bit of a fun fact. But I'm curious if there's any old ghost stories that you guys know, maybe anything local. Let me know in those comments down below, and let me know if there's anything you'd like to see next. Anyway, I hope you have a very Merry Christmas. If this video makes it out before then, hopefully it will. I guess we'll find out. If not, then I hope you had a very happy holiday, and I'll see you guys next time.